I wanted to talk with you about the topic of perfectionism or idealistic thinking. A good amount of the people that I work with are challenged with this issue, and it's one I actually personally work on as well. So I talk about this from experience. I call myself a recovering perfectionist. We all need to do high quality work, but excessive attention to detail can do more harm than good. In his book, The Pursuit of Perfect, Dr. Tal Ben Shahar tells us that there are two types of perfectionism: adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism. Adaptive perfectionists work on developing their skills. Their standards are always rising and they approach work with optimism, pleasure, and a desire to improve. Clearly, this is a healthy type of perfectionism. Maladaptive perfectionists, by contrast, are never satisfied with what they achieve. It's never good enough. If something isn't perfect, they dismiss it. They may also experience fear of failure, doubt, unhappiness, and other painful emotions. And we need to understand the difference between maladaptive perfectionism and a healthy quest for success. Maladaptive perfectionists see mistakes as unacceptable and think that these lead others to see them as incompetent. People striving for excellence in a healthy way see mistakes as an opportunity to grow. They understand that mistakes are a growing part of the learning process, and they accept them. So, for the purpose of this section, we're going to focus on the maladaptive perfectionist. Clearly, you do need to work hard and deliver the best results possible. But the consequence of the need for everything perfect are costly. You're being wasteful when you keep tweaking your work once you've completed it. And when it gets out of hand, it can hold you back professionally and personally. So let's look at some of the consequences. Compromised general health. Perfectionism's been linked to health issues like eating disorders, depression, migraines, anxiety, and, and more. Poor self esteem. It has a negative impact on self esteem, and perfectionists see their self worth tied into what they achieve and believe that they're judged on this by others. And because they're never satisfied with their achievements, they can never live up to the standards they set for themselves, and this can lead to a downward spiral of self criticism and blame. Procrastination. A perfectionist tends to conjure up an immaculate vision of how things should be, and it usually involves a lot of work in their minds. It's already hard to get stuff done, and if it needs to be perfect, then they avoid starting it because it's just so daunting. And because of this procrastination, perfectionists often fall behind on their work. This can affect their reputation and work relationships. It affects creativity. One of the consequences is that it has an inhibiting nature. Perfectionism keeps us from taking risks and it constrains our playfulness and our desire to dream. And this in turn reduces our ability to innovate and be creative. Stress with a guarantee. Perfectionism and work stress always go hand in hand. As a perfectionist feels the pressure of completing each project to an imagined level of perfection, he will often become stressed as the work he completes does not meet his standards or the expectations he perceives others have of him. It wastes time. Time spent adjusting, tweaking, readjusting over and over eats up precious working hours. I once worked with a client who was a manager in a large organization, and every week there was a weekly report that every manager in this certain area had to fill in. And so the report got handed down from one manager to the next to the next. And every time it reached my client, he would spend crazy amounts of time adjusting the column widths and the fonts and making everything look good before he was able to save it and pass it on to the next manager down the line. And then the next week he repeated the same process over and over and over. When you set perfection as the standard for all your objectives, you are being unnecessarily harsh on yourself. It lowers productivity. You spend too much time on it because one becomes extremely detail oriented about every single thing. They get weighed down by every problem and get caught up by the need to create everything, well, perfectly. And then they keep correcting tiny mistakes that don't even make a difference. Turning off that need for everything to be done to exacting standards is not an easy thing to do, though. It takes a desire to change and vigilance, to be more self aware so that when you catch yourself in the midst of this behavior, you can shift your direction. So let's look at some strategies for becoming a healthier perfectionist. And you can follow along with these in your workbook on page 32. So done is better than perfect. Just like the example I shared about my client and his spreadsheet, getting it done is far more important than making it look great. Just jump in and finish what you start. Don't allow your perfectionism to prevent you from starting or completing a project. As a matter of fact, if you've been holding off starting something because you're still getting your ducks in a row, my suggestion is to just dive in and start. Sometimes clarity comes from doing. Draw the line. Use the 80-20 rule, where 80% is the finished product and you eliminate that 20% that you spend making it just right. This frees you up to take on the next task or project. Strict time limits. If you give yourself 3 hours to complete something, you'll take 3 hours to complete it. But if you give yourself 1 hour, it'll take you 1 hour. So set a reasonable time limit, maybe with some rules, like no unnecessary research or no fancy formatting as examples. And when the time is up, move on to another task or take a break. And here's a tip for you. Set the timer to give you at least a 5 or 10 minute warning that you're running out of time. I find that if I set the intention to stop working on something at a specific time, I work more efficiently and I'm likely to stick to the self-imposed time frame. Embrace mistakes. Be okay with making mistakes. All humans do. Attempting to achieve 100% perfection is highly ineffective. The more you open yourself to making mistakes, the quicker you get down to learning from them, and rather than viewing them as personal flaws. And question your beliefs and challenge your thinking. Is it really so important for everything you do to be just so? What are the costs versus benefits of spending excessive time making something ultra perfect? Strive for excellence versus perfection. Life is full of imperfection. Of course, it's important to give your very best, but always seeking and striving for perfection in all that you do will prevent you from being your best possible self. It actually works against you. And perfectionism isn't profitable. Something done imperfectly on time is often better than something done perfectly, but late. So don't waste time with details that don't really matter in the end. Remember, your job is to make sure things get done, one priority at a time. And just one last piece on this topic. If you look at the bottom of page 32 of your workbooks, you'll notice that there's a mathematical calculation there. I took a time management course once, and the instructor used this formula as a way of demonstrating how a perfectionist's mind works. So you can see there that it's 1 plus 1 equals, and then it's this crazy convoluted formula that really amounts to 2. The mind creates unnecessary complexity to everything. And as you look at your own life and your own systems, do you see areas of unnecessary complexity? Are there needless steps involved in doing something that's relatively simple? You may want to recreate this and post it somewhere as a reminder to simplify the things you tend to add this layer of complexity to. Page 33 in your workbooks, there's a chart there that you may want to reference as well for descriptions and that describes the difference between excellence and perfectionism. And I've also given some additional resources on your webpage if you're interested in learning more about this topic. So that is it for perfectionism. The last time bandit you'll be covering is mastering the art of delegation.